We are back in the woods. It is raining ever so slightly. A squirrel just crossed my path ahead. And I felt like this was the perfect setting in this messy, organic, beautiful place to talk about AI in writing. And I wanted to talk about this because in the past couple of months there have been a couple of scandals in the writing community. Firstly, there was Shy Girl, which is I think an indie book that was self-published and got a lot of traction online, and it was taken up with a traditional publisher, and then came out all the accusations of AI generated writing. And then more recently there was a short story prize endorsed by Granta magazine, which is a prestigious literary magazine, where one or more of the winners was also accused of using AI. Now, I don't know enough about those cases to comment, so I'm not going to pass any judgment here, but it did get me thinking. I would love to know if you use AI in your writing and how exactly you use it, how and if you find it helpful, where you find it not helpful, and what you think the limits should be. I thought I could share with you exactly how I do and do not use AI in my writing, and I'd love to know how you use it or don't use it too. And yes, I am on a rope swing because I love to swing. So when I'm talking about AI in this video, I'm specifically talking about generative AI like Google Gemini, ChatGPT, all those kind of things. I've personally only used ChatGPT and Gemini. I've got no idea really about any of the others, but just to let you know, that's the type of AI I'm talking about. So firstly, let me tell you about how I do not use AI. So I never use it for anything technical, like spelling, grammar, sentence structure, any of those things. And that's simply because I don't feel like I need that type of support. I'm quite confident I'm writing in my native language. Even though I'm new to fiction writing, I'm not new to writing in general. I work as an academic and I've got years of experience of writing stuff in English, including things like a PhD thesis, journal articles, blogs, reports, things like that. So I'm quite confident in the technicalities of writing. I also don't use AI in my editing at all. I think I could use it to do things like help me reduce wordiness, stuff like that. But I don't use it for that, and actually I kind of enjoy that part of editing, so I don't feel like I have any cause to ask for help in that regard. Or, you know, if it's a struggle, you just struggle through it or ask for external feedback, something like that. I've also never fed my work into AI, so I've never pasted in a story. It's never read any of my work, let's say. And again, that's because I don't feel like I've had any need or cause to do that, but also because I don't want it to then have my story in its data. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really know how this stuff works, but I don't want it to collect my story as data and be trained on it. I want to retain that story, and I want to retain control over who I share that with. And then lastly, in case it wasn't clear by this point, I've never asked AI to write me a story, for the record. Now at this point, I'll just say that I think there probably are, but I'm not sure, legitimate reasons to use AI for some of the things that I've just listed and said that I don't use it for. As I said, I'm writing in my own language, I'm familiar with writing, I'm confident with my sentence structures, grammar, stuff like that. Not everybody is in that position, and I recognise that some people might need or want additional support. So I'm just telling you the things that I don't use it for. I'm not saying that nobody should ever use it for that, apart from the writing one. I'm pretty sure that there are specific softwares, some of which may or may not use AI, that are designed specifically to help people with things like grammar. I do think that as writers, we all have different needs, and we live in different contexts, and we require different levels of assistance from various forms of technology, basically. So what do I use AI for in my writing? Well, I use it in two specific ways. Look at all the life on here. Amazing. So the first way I use it is to research settings for my stories. And of course, when you're writing a story, the setting is incredibly important. You want it to feel real. You want the reading experience to be immersive. And therefore, if you're writing about a real place in a real time period, you want it to be accurate, essentially. So I have used AI to find things out about the settings I'm writing about. You might remember I was writing a story set in a psychiatric hospital in the 1970s. Now again, that's a setting that I had a bit of familiarity with, but not the specifics and not the details. So what I wanted to find out was things like different cleaning products and cleaning processes that would be used at that time, because it's set in the 1970s, and because my story centers around the experiences of a cleaner. So I wanted to find out that information. Now at this point, you could very well say, why don't you just use Google for that? You can easily find that sort of information from just a quick Google search. And you would be exactly right. You can find that information out from a quick Google. However, I will say that I quite like the conversational nature of an AI, in that you can ask it a question in human phrasing as if you were asking a person, whereas just Google doesn't really respond well to those kind of questions. And then in addition, in the way that it answers, the AI is already sort of organizing things, often, well, nearly always thematically, to present the answers to you, rather than providing a list of relevant links and sources and so on. And I also like that aspect about it. Now, also here, I very quickly came up against the limits of AI, or this could just be what I dislike about AI. Now, ultimately, it's generative, right? So it's always going to add its own twist on things. So as soon as you say to it, I'm writing a story, it's set in a hospital in 1970, it starts kind of offering ideas for the story. It starts like throwing things out there, and it's like, oh, is it about this? Tell me more. Do you want me to read your opening paragraph? And all that kind of thing. I'm like, no, stop. And at that point I kind of stop using it, and I'm like, all right, enough. I'm kind of sick of it. I dislike that partly because I'm like, stop telling me what to do, but also because I can see how easily it is to get drawn into using AI generated content, because it's offering itself up. And because it's generative, it's never just answering your questions in a straightforward way. It's never giving a straight answer. There's always like some extra. It's always extra, right? It's giving you more than you've asked for, essentially, and it wants you to kind of keep using it and stay engaged. And I dislike that about it. So that is usually the point where I'm like, okay, I've found the information that I need. Thank you very much. Goodbye. The second way I've been using it is to research potential publication outlets like literary magazines or anthologies. So my aim is to get published. I want to publish my short stories. Now, if you've been here a while, you'll know that my original aim was to publish a short story collection, and I soon found out, well, not soon, it took me about 6 months, I found out that it's incredibly difficult, even by all traditional publishing competitive standards, to get a short story collection published if you are an entirely unknown author, like I am. So that meant that I had to pivot my strategy. So instead of thinking about approaching agents and querying a short story collection, I am now instead looking for outlets where I can submit individual short stories to. And those outlets include writing competitions, literary magazines, and anthologies, collections of short stories. And what I'm going to be completely transparent about is, as a new writer, I had really no idea that this whole world existed of literary magazines. Obviously, I'd heard of publications like The New Yorker, right? But beyond that, completely clueless. Been using AI to ask, find out about, get an overview of this whole scene I'm completely not familiar with. So essentially, I've been talking to Google Gemini to try and build up a picture and lists of different competitions, magazines, and potential like indie publishers as well, some of which accept direct submissions for their anthologies. And what I'm doing is taking notes in each of those categories and saving them. And what I will do next is build crows, maybe? I've been using that. What actually do you think that noise is? It kind of sounds like a pig. I don't think there are any pigs here. So here, of course, one of the advantages of using AI is that aspect that I just complained about before, right? Which is the aspect that you can kind of build on things when you're asking it questions. So, you know, I'm not only looking for outlets that publish horror, I'm also interested in mainstream literary magazines that might consider horror and ghost stories. And then again, I'm also writing a specific genre of ghost stories that are quite specific to the British tradition. So I'm kind of building layers and layers of questions to really get to what might be the key magazines or contests or presses that I'm going to want to target. And that is much more useful than just Googling these things. Now again, full transparency, another reason that I'm using it in this way is because a lot of these magazines, not all of them, but a lot of them are subscription only. So you need to pay a subscription to access the content in the magazine. And of course, you need to read what they're publishing, right? And if you're not able to read it for free online, I think that that is going to be a challenge for lots of writers and lots of readers. I can understand why that's the case for literary magazines. They need to cover their costs, right, in order to be able to keep publishing. So I think that's probably what the subscription fee covers in a lot of these cases. But still, I personally can't afford to subscribe to several magazines in order to read their content. Now, there are some great magazines in the horror genre in particular where you can read some of the short stories or extracts for free, and that's really useful. So two of those that I came across today are The Dark and Nightmare. So these are really well-known literary magazines in the horror genre as well. So they've got stuff up there that you can read for free. And a lot of magazines do have bits that you can read for free as well, and some of them don't, basically. And that is where the AI is really useful in providing that kind of general overview. Now, it's absolutely no substitution for reading the actual stories. I'm not saying that, but it is useful as an entry point for getting a general understanding of, is this a publication that I'm going to want to look into more in the future? A big drop of rain just landed on the palm of my hand. One thing that I've now started doing in light of recent conversations around AI is just to cover myself. I started saving drafts as different documents. So I have draft 1, draft 2, well, that's about as far as I've got for now, but I will have draft 3 and so on of all my stories, so that essentially there's a paper trail, right? So I can show how they've evolved, how they've been written, and that they've been written entirely by me. So I also think that that's useful because in my editing, sorry, I'm waving my umbrella at you. In my editing, I am likely to lose a lot of words, and there are bits in there that I might want to keep and reuse in another story, right? So if you have that paper trail, you can go back into draft 1, pull out those few hundred words that didn't make it into one story, and maybe there's an idea in there or some prose that you want to rework to go in another story as well. So it's also useful for that. That's all I've got for today on AI, but this topic is not going to go away. So I think it's important that we have open and transparent conversations about it, right? So let me know in the comments how you use AI, if you find it useful, what you definitely don't use it for, where your red lines are, and what you think about the whole AI writing scandal in general. It's starting to get a bit dark in here now. Never did find out what was making that noise. Honestly, in places like this, the stories just write themselves. Bye.